everyone, Hamer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time we've got Season 5, Episode 11, which is called The Rebel. This one begins in a rural town where Jim and Dana come in as archaeologists. Their IDs are checked by a sentry guard. Interesting note, Dana shows the guard a fake passport, which is the same one that she used in flight. As a matter of fact, I think that shot is probably lifted from that episode and just kind of inserted in. They're stopped a little bit down the road by a bunch of gun-toting folks, but using spy speak, Jim confirms that he's their friend, who recently got two important rebel scientists out of the country. The third was the father of the rebel leader, Alex Cora, and he refused to leave the country and is now dead. Jim says he's returned for Dr. Cora's notebook, as Dana spots a light behind them on a hill, so the group decides to disperse. The light turns out to be a colonel's binoculars, or the reflection off of those binoculars, and a gunfight ensues. More soldiers come in jeeps and chase the rebels, with Jim being shot in the shoulder and Dana captured with two of the others named Klaus and Irina. The three captives are put in a prison cell where Dana discovers a bug that Irina breaks, for what it's worth, and soldiers take Klaus away for questioning by Colonel Bakram. It turns out that Klaus is actually a mole, working for Bakram, who is also looking for the notebook on behalf of his government. Klaus says Alex would only trust Irina with it, but she was searched and doesn't have it. Bakram figures all they have to do is wait, and the rebels will try and mount a rescue attempt, during which he intends obviously to crush them. Jim somehow manages to get away from the soldiers and finds an old ruined monastery where he meets up again with Alex and his rebel band. Jim asks Alex for the notebook, which he said he had, but Alex tells him the notes are actually in Irina's memory, so he doesn't have it anymore. Alex wants to go in with guns blazing, but Jim says that won't work. They're outnumbered, so asks for time to make a plan. Alex tells him he sounds like Father Sebastian, the local priest who's always preaching patience. He agrees to give Jim until noon tomorrow to get them out, else they're going in. That night, Barney and Doug parachute down to the rebel location, which is spotted on radar. Klaus is brought back to the cell in exchange for Dana, but she reveals nothing even after getting roughed up by the soldiers. Barney tells Jim that Paris is getting into position, and Doug doesn't allow Jim to shrug off the bullet in his arm, forcing him to sit down and get it removed. The soldiers return again for Klaus, leaving Irina wondering why she hasn't been questioned, and Dana starts wondering the same thing. Bakram tells Klaus he figures that Irina won't talk to save herself, but he figures she might do so to save one or both of the other two. Jim outlines his plan to the rebel crew, who are against it, but Alex tells them he gave his word, so they better fall in line for now and follow Jim's lead. Paris arrives as a government representative who has arrived to try and reestablish faith in the government, and tells Bakram it involves getting the clergy on their side. He tells Bakram that they must formulate a plan to work around Father Sebastian if they can't work with him. Irina hears Klaus screaming and wants to talk, but Dana tells her to be strong and stay quiet. Paris visits the church and talks with Father Sebastian about how he would like to work with him. But the priest is rightfully skeptical. He knows that the government doesn't want anything to do with the church except to use it, and Paris takes his lead. Soldiers come to the site where the rebels are getting ready and are surrounded by them. The rebels want to execute them, but Jim countermands them, saying they had a deal, so the rebels relent. Barney and Doug drive a truck into town with a statue of a saint, with the truck breaking down in the town square. Bakram at first is uncooperative about it and just wants them to get it out, but Paris convinces him to try and establish some good PR with the people. So he orders his men to at least help them out, as Paris indicates to a still standoffish Father Sebastian that it might be a statue of Saint Stephen, the patron saint of the area, to which Sebastian replies, no, it isn't. Paris taps the statue as a signal to Jim and Alex, who are concealed inside. The statue is lowered so the truck can be towed away, on top of a grate which leads into a storm drain down to the barracks and prison. Even though the statue isn't of St. Stephen, the townspeople seem to become convinced that it is, and Paris urges his Bakram to take advantage of that situation and keep it for them and take the credit for it. Jim and Alex start digging into where the cell is, as the rebels head out as it's almost noon. Father Sebastian tells Paris and Bakram that he knows what they and the government are trying to do with their empty gestures, and refuses to allow the statue to be put at his church. Bakram's lieutenant orders the statue moved, which Barney starts to do, despite the fact that it will reveal the removed grave. But Paris urges Bakram to intervene and not let the priest win. And he does, so down it goes, fortunately, with Bakram taking the credit and Sebastian looking on glumly. A little girl tells Sebastian that her little dog seems to think there's something under that statue. Paris suggests to Bakram that the way to solidify his victory might be to put the statue at the monastery, where it will feel more special than just sitting in the town square, and the priest could not possibly object to that. Jim and Alex reach the cell foundation as the clock approaches noon, and the rebels get into position at the church. Klaus is thrown back in the cell, and Dana looks him over. He tells Irina he can't stand the pain any longer and begs her to talk to Bakram. She decides to do it, and when Dana tries to stop her, Klaus jumps up and tells her to leave Irina alone. Dana notices how quickly he recovered and points it out to Irina, along with a reminder that it was Klaus who started the gunfight in the beginning of the episode. Irina still finds it hard to believe as they start to hear Alex and Jim digging outside the cell. Klaus starts to alert the guards, and Dana knocks him out with a stool, showing Irina that Bakram's men never tortured him at all. Bakram agrees to Paris's plan as Jim and Alex finally make it through into the cell, and the four of them scurry out and back into the hollowed-out statue. Alex finds it hard to believe that Klaus was a mole, but Jim says they'll talk about it later. Barney raises the statue, and the rebels see the grate put back into position, meaning that the plan worked. Barney and Doug take the statue to the monastery, with Father Sebastian following along at the request of the little girl. Bakram discovers Klaus tied up in the cell and the hole in its side, so jeeps are seen coming towards the monastery as there's obviously been an escape. Father Sebastian calls the assembled throng together to pray, and with carefully chosen words alerts the four inside the statue that the soldiers are coming. So they exit the statue and crawl away through the crowd. As the people look on, Bakram sends the statue crashing down, but of course it's empty and he is discredited as the IMF head away with Irina. Mission accomplished, I guess. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a D+. I like the scene where Doug kind of stands up to Jim about his injury. Jim's like, I got work to do. I ain't got time to bleed, as Jesse Ventura used to say. And Doug tells him, sit down. We got to get this bullet out of you. So, that was kind of neat. I liked that. It's unique, it's been very, very unusual for the IMF. I also liked visually, I liked the tunnel and the statue escape. It looks good visually on the screen. The way that it's kind of laid out, and there's a little bit, and there's a decent amount of suspense built in there. And so I definitely did like that. I also liked Davana Brown, who plays Irina in this one. She, interestingly enough, I looked her up on IMDb, and she has only one other IMDb credit, which is kind of weird. I guess she didn't want to pursue a career in the entertainment or film industry, and I really can't find any other information about her, which is kind of weird. So I don't really know what to say about that. However, though, there's a lot of not good about this episode now that I pointed out those things that were good. This episode has a lot of little twists and turns, and the individual plot segments are okay. But to me, the story doesn't really seem to kind of knit well together. There's this feeling I have of it being kind of very disjointed. I don't know. There's no oomph there. It just does seem kind of very cookie cutter and in a below average way. Good guest stars like Mark Leonard, who plays Colonel Bakram, and Arthur Batanides, who's not even credited in this one, I don't know why, as his lieutenant. They're kind of ordinary in this. Colonel Bakram is a little bit lively at some points, but again, his lameness as the antagonist, he's pretty easily manipulated by Paris just to kind of, go along with the IMF plan. It's a little bit disappointing in that regard. There definitely is nothing to write home about when it comes in this episode. There's nothing we haven't seen before. And again, really, really disjointed. Think about it like this. I would say that plot-wise, the high point of this episode, it comes at about the 10-minute mark, where Klaus is revealed as being a mole. After that, I don't really, the plot, I would say, kind of goes really, really, really flat from there. And that shouldn't be the case. There should be some peaks and valleys, but everything does really kind of go flat after that, even maybe a little bit downward, depending on how you look at it. And that's the feeling that I came away with. Like, okay, it's just really a matter of, how we're going to get to where we need to go, in a sense. And it almost makes the ending seem like a bit of a foregone conclusion in my mind. It really falls short of the mark, just in general. The biggest problem in this episode, it's really, really, really blatant, and I find it hard to believe that it wasn't blatant even to a 1970s audience, is the horrible, horrible dubbing of Alex Cora's voice by voice actor Vic Perrin, who's dubbed a lot of voices on the show for various reasons. And, Vic Perrin was a very, very, very good voice actor. And I'm sure he did his best. Certainly, it's not a bad job in any sense of the word. I just really wonder why they had to do that. It really makes the whole episode come off as it gives it kind of that air of disingenuousness. And I already mentioned that the action and the plot seems a little bit disjointed and cookie cutter. We're bouncing around between locations, it seems, really, really quickly and really, really haphazardly. We're looking at the rebels, and then we're looking at the statue, and then we're looking at Colonel Backram, and then we're looking inside the cell. I mean, I get it. It's not that difficult to kind of follow along, but I just don't really feel that there's a lot of cogency or coherence to this story, and and I don't really feel motivated to even kind of try and find it if it is there. So I'm going to stick by my grade of a D+ for this one. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you all for watching. Please like this episode review video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and please leave your comments as always. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.